Hello and welcome back, future scientists. I'm Mr. K with Mississippi Public Broadcasting. We're going to continue our unit today talking about Darwin, and we're going to switch it up a little bit and talk about something known as competition. Now, I know we're not talking about sports or some kind of challenge amongst your friends, but competition plays a crucial role in Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection, and I'll kind of explain why that is today. So let's go ahead and get the ball rolling and see what we're learning about. So we're going to start off by talking about an individual known as Thomas Malthus. Now, he was not a scientist, he was actually an economist. So he studied the economy. He studied populations and resources. And some of Malthus's biggest findings were that populations grow exponentially while resources grow linearly. What that means is that populations grow at a much faster rate than resources do. This means eventually the population will grow so quickly that there will not be enough resources to keep up with the population growth. And he had this graph that kind of summarizes it in a lot of detail. So here's what's going on here. Look at this line. You can see that the population line is growing much faster. We would say that this is an exponential growth. You can see that instead of just being a straight line, it starts to bow upward, right? We call that an exponential growth. It's growing very, very quickly here, okay? So this would be like the population. Imagine you're studying a group of deer, right? And if all the conditions are right for that deer population, they're just gonna keep reproducing and reproducing, right? Because there's nothing stopping them. Well, you can see here that this line, on the other hand, is the production of food. And this could be food or any resource, really. This could be habitat or food or anything like that. Well, what's going on is that the population is going to grow at a much faster rate than the production of food would. Okay? And eventually what's going to happen when these two lines meet, that's usually a very, very bad thing. What's going on here is that now anything above this line right here, the population growth is not sustainable because there's not enough food, there's not enough resources to support that population. And that means that we're going to get some sort of catastrophe. This could be like a famine or a drought. So maybe there's a lot of people living in a certain area, but if there's not enough food or water to support them, we're going to have something bad that happens. And this would start to bring that population line down below the production of food line. So once this happens, instead of continuing to grow exponentially, this would start to bring the population back down, right, under this line. And so this plays a crucial role for Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit with y'all today. So let's talk about competition. Why is this so important when you're studying evolution? So competition. There is never enough for all conceivable wants. This is a term known as scarcity. So basically what scarcity is saying is that there's not enough for everybody to have everything they want all the time, right? There will always be competition for food, water, habitats, and other resources. Some individuals will be more successful than others at acquiring these resources. Some individuals will not be able to find enough of these resources to survive. So what happens next? Okay, well, in biology, there's a really important term that I need us to know called fitness. And you've heard this term before, and you've probably heard the term survival of the fittest. But in a biology class, fitness has a different meaning than how it's used in everyday language. When we talk about fitness, we usually mean how strong somebody is. But in a biology class, that's not what it means. In biology, fitness refers to the ability of an organism to reproduce, not how strong you are. So for example here, mules are very, very strong, but they can't reproduce. So their fitness is 0. Mules are like a hybrid between a donkey and a horse. So mules cannot reproduce by themselves, right? So although mules are very strong, because they can't reproduce, we would say that their fitness is 0. So organisms must live long enough to reach reproductive age and then be able to find a mate and reproduce. If an organism dies before they can reproduce, their fitness is 0. Okay, so it doesn't matter how strong you are. When we say survival of the fittest, we mean how likely are you to survive and then reproduce and make offspring. If you make a lot of offspring, your fitness is very high. If you don't make any offspring, your fitness is very, very low. And this plays a very important role, and I kind of wanted to talk you through this term, survival of the fittest, which most of us have heard before. So when we say survival of the fittest, it's a term that you've heard a lot, and you'll hear it a lot over the next couple of weeks, but it is often misunderstood. This does not mean that animals that are the strongest are the ones that survive, but instead refers to the ability of an organism to survive long enough to reproduce. To survive, organisms must compete against each other for food, water, habitat, mates, and other resources. Those that survive and reproduce pass on their genes. Those genes are the ones that stick around in the next generation. So it doesn't really matter how strong you are. If you're very, very strong, but you don't have any offspring, then you're not passing your genes along to the next generation. If you don't pass your genes on, those strong genes might get left behind, and they're not going to show up in the next generation. So by saying survival of the fittest, what we really mean is how likely are you to survive and make offspring and pass on your genes. If you pass on your genes, then those genes stick around in the gene pool and they'll continue to be seen in further generations. Okay, so let's talk about survival of the fittest a little bit more here. By passing on the genes that made the organisms fit, small changes can be seen over generations in populations. Those individuals that did not survive long enough to reproduce or were unable to find a mate don't get to pass on their genes to the next generation. These genes may be lost in the population over time. In this way, nature selects the most fit genes. This is known as natural selection. Y'all, thank you so much for making it here today. My name is Mr. K. Your teacher has some other work for you to work on, so make sure to give that your best effort, and I hope everybody has a great day.